Hi, welcome to the Quantum Mike YouTube channel. Today, we're doing our first video. As you can see, I am very professional. I have a lovely green screen, camera, an off-screen light source, and I thought today, our first video could be looking at the FCC feasibility test. So essentially, recently, there has been, a release by the group who work on the Large Hadron Collider about a proposition for the upcoming really big addition to it, which was currently called the Future Circular Collider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shrink my camera up into the corner, and then together we are going to go ahead and walk through the feasibility study page and just sort of read through it, do some commentary, and then maybe for some future videos afterwards, we'll go ahead and talk about the different propositions and talk about them in a bit more detail. Am I qualified to talk about this? Well, I do particle physics, and I currently do research related to the ATLAS experiment. As we can see here, ATLAS, which is on the Large Hadron Collider. So I have at least been to CERN. Will I put a picture of me at CERN up? Maybe, if I remember to do that when editing. But if not, trust me. All right, time to shrink the camera. There we go. And that looks big enough for me. All right, feasibility study. Right, so over the past 50 years, particle colliders have been among the main scientific instruments used to understand the most fundamental particles and laws of the universe. Within 27-kilometer circumference, the Large Hadron Collider, the LHC, is currently the most powerful particle collider in the world. And the upcoming upgrade, the high luminosity phase, or the HLLHC, which should be coming into effect soonish, will increase the machine's discovery potential with a program for research in 2040. Yeah, that's the current plan. We're currently on run 3 of the Large Hadron Collider. That's ending next year. Yeah, 2025, 2026. We're going until about July, running, collecting data, and then we go for what's called the long break, something like that. We're going to go on a very long pause for multiple years to upgrade the Large Hadron Collider, this big circular particle accelerator, to be more powerful. All right, so they say the future of high-energy physics in the 21st century hinges on designing and building colliders capable for pushing the energy and intensity frontiers by an order of magnitude beyond the present values. Yeah. So essentially, in particle physics, we collide particles at a very high energy. They smash together. They collide, and then we get essentially phenomenons occur, and we get particles produced. And those particles that are produced, we detect. The thing is, we don't have the full picture of how the universe works. And as we've been upgrading the Large Hadron Collider, ever since the discovery of the Higgs boson back in 2012, we haven't really seen anything new. And that's worrying. So we kind of need to keep pushing that frontier of how powerful our smashing is, because the more energy we put into the smashing, the more possible things we can kind of produce, and more likely we are to produce very strange and rare things, especially if we collide more frequently. So that's kind of what we're looking for. The high luminosity phase, that is more upcoming recent thing to the Large Hadron Collider. Luminosity is kind of a good way to think of how many particles are in a section. So we have these beams. They're sort of like lines, and the lines have a certain size to them, and we shoot a bunch of particles. So for a higher luminosity, you have more particles shooting through that area at a higher rate. It's kind of like light. A brighter light has more luminosity if it's producing more light particles, photons. And so the more luminosity, the more photons. For us, our beams are more luminous if they have more stuff in them. That makes a higher chance of a collision. Higher energy allows us to produce more interesting physics. Hopefully, fingers crossed. So they say the Future Circular Collider, the FCC study, explores the different collider options. Yeah. Combined in a single research infrastructure built in a 100-kilometer underground tunnel. And you gotta keep in mind, the Large Hadron Collider is 27 kilometers around, and it's big. It goes essentially underground through around Geneva out into France and back down. Actually, most of it's in France, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 3 of the 4 experiments are located in France. But still, it's really big. It's across countries. So because it's so big, that's 27 kilometers. And a 100-kilometer one is going to be humongous. It might go under Lake. I think it's actually supposed to go under Lake Geneva. We'll probably see more of that. Yeah, you can solve. It can offer a solid and diverse physics program extending beyond the end of the century. Bum bum bum. It'll be interesting to see how big it is and how they run it. And we'll see. This isn't going to be anytime soon. Well, it will be soon in relation to particle physics, but even then, we'll talk about it. Yeah. So here we go. These are kind of the phases that we've built. So the Tevatron was the first one of these circular colliders, and it was 6.2 kilometers in size, and it went at 2 tera-electron volts. The Large Hadron Collider is now at about 14 tera-electron volts. And there was also an earlier one at, oh yeah, that would have been LAP, which was the earlier version, 209 GeV, giga-electron volts, 27 kilometers around. And then this future circular collider, 80 to 100, at 100 tera-electron volts for protons, and then very high too for electrons, which is good. Maybe we'll talk a bit about LAP and stuff another time. But anyways, okay, context. A key recommendation of the 2020 update to the European Strategy for Particle Physics is that Europe, in collaboration with the worldwide particle physics community, should undertake a feasibility study for a next-generation Hadron Collider. This is what this study is kind of about. This is the official paperwork. This is the overview brought to us by CERN. Ooh, my head's in the way of that part. All right, let's do that. So a key recommendation for the 2020 update. Yep. As a result, from 2021 to 2027, the Future Circular Collider FCC feasibility study is investigating the technical and financial viability of such a facility. Yeah, they've been thinking about this for a while. This year, they've just sort of officially produced this. This is kind of came out recently, and I'll put it in the description. So this is kind of the overview of the proposed setup for now. And it'll take them a while. It's going to take them a while to build it too. Tea. All right. Yeah, so they want to essentially see what is going to be required technically and financially to build this stupid big particle collider. Feasibility studies is going to include scientific components, numerous technical considerations, as well as administrative and financial issues, and massive work in terms of territorial feasibility, because it's going to have to go in France and in Switzerland. And that's going to be big. All right. Yeah, if the outcome of the feasibility study is positive, woohoo, CERN's member states and its international partners may endorse a more in-depth technical feasibility study of the project. So essentially, if it gets approved, they're going to do an even bigger check. And then this process will endorse the next steps towards the final approval of this project and the start of the construction of it in the mid-2030s. So in about 10 years' time, with the first step of an electron-positron collider called the FCC. So this will be a lepton particle collider, and that'll be interesting. It's essentially going to be a bigger version of LEP. LEP was essentially like the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider, but instead of colliding hadrons, which are essentially protons, well, hadrons are not just protons. We're going to do a quick diatribe. Mainly, okay, a lepton are things like electrons, muons, tau. There are 3 types of leptons. Technically, there are 6 because they each have a neutrino. These are elementary particles. Hadrons are 3 quark combination particles. These are particles that are made up of 3 quarks, and they're bound together by gluons, which sort of keep them held tight. Hadrons include protons, they include neutrons, and some other stuff, but those are kind of the main things. So at the Large Hadron Collider, we mainly collide protons, and then sometimes we collide some heavy ion particles as well, but it's mostly protons. What's interesting is with leptons, since they're elementary particles, when they collide, you get very clean collisions. There's not a lot of excess noise. But when you're colliding hadrons, you have 3 quarks. So 3 different particles that are each moving at a different momentum. What you got to think about is with a particle traveling, the total particle has a total momentum, but the things inside of it each have their own momentums, and they're not divided evenly. So each of those different particles have their own momentum, and then they've got little gluons connecting them together. And actually, it's not even that simple. Really, you have this stew of particle-antiparticles produced in between that are kind of linked together and disappear. So when they smash together, you have a lot of small things that all kind of gloop, and maybe they'll collide, and their energies will range in value. So it's not going to be quite as clean as, this particle with this momentum, this particle with this momentum, smashed together. All right, where were we? Yeah, so they want to do the electron-positron collider, the FCC beginning in 2045. So in 20 years' time. And then a second machine colliding protons. So FCC which is, again, a hadron collider, essentially. In the same tunnel, would extend the research program from the 2070s until the end of the century. So this is essentially a plan for the next 80 years, if not more. So that's big. This is a big commitment on CERN's part. But let's see. Okay, feasibility study for new research infrastructure. Ooh. The Future Collider would be built in a approximately 91 kilometer ring-shaped underground tunnel between the French departments of Savoy and Ain and the Swiss canton of Geneva. Okay. Which is essentially just where we already are, but it'll be expanded in size. Well-known constraints restrict the layout to a limited area. Yep. We must avoid geologically complex areas. That's important. Certain geologies can actually produce certain backgrounds, as well as, of course, make it harder to bore the tunnels that they need. And also, it's important to keep in mind when we make physics experiments, especially if they're underground, there's actually a lot of geology that needs to be kept in mind, which might be a fun topic to talk about sometime. It must maximize the efficiency of future colliders. That's important, right? Be connectable to the LHC. Yeah, this is actually an important element. With how the LHC has been built, where Tevatron is. When we were talking about that earlier up here, Tevatron actually is now part of what feeds into the Large Hadron Collider. That has to do with how circular colliders kind of ramp up, which could be a fun topic to talk about another time, but we're not going to do that right now. What we will do is we will come down here. And, all right, where were we? I must be able to connect to the LHC. They're probably going to want to use the LHC like they use the Tevatron, where it's essentially an addition to where we ramp up the particles before they enter the FCC. The location of the surface sites must respect social and environmental constraints. Very important. Right? If there's a law that says you can't go underground, they can't go underground. For this reason, diverse variants of the layout are being considered. So they have a bunch of different layout plans. So they don't quite know where it's going to go. Following the principles, avoid, reduce, compensate to ensure sustainable design for future generations. Very important. Essentially, we're just going to try to do our best to find the best way to build the collider sustainably, which is important. The FCC tunnel would house 2 colliders, one after the other. First step aimed to start operations in the 2040s is an electron-positron, which we learned about, the FCCE, which would provide unprecedented precision measurements and potentially point the way to physics beyond the standard model, right? Which is what we'd hope it would do. And the second step is our proton-proton collider, our FCCHH, reaching energies of up to 8 times of those of the Large Hadron Collider, and new discovery potential. Very exciting. Very, very exciting. So this is, I guess, one of the proposed layouts. And oh boy, it's going to be big. So here's Geneva. This is where Jet d'Eau, which is a famous Genevan landmark, is. And then you go out of Geneva past, there's the airport, a town called Meyrin, and then you get to CERN's here. And the Large Hadron Collider essentially goes through some of Switzerland, out into France, through some of Switzerland, out, and back in. Yeah, so there's three experiments out here, one experiment in Geneva over here, or in Switzerland, which is Atlas, the one that I like. We like Atlas here. So it seems they're proposing essentially to make it mostly in France, which was inevitable because Geneva isn't very big. Most of Switzerland is over on this side. It's very small. It will have to go through Geneva. This isn't putting it under the lake very much, but it might have to go into the lake. Conveniently, there isn't a subway system in Geneva. And I don't know how Geneva's plumbing system is laid out, but the Large Hadron Collider, if I remember correctly, is about 100 meters under the ground. And I would assume the sewer system isn't quite that deep in Geneva. This is not a question I've ever considered, but it's probably going to be important. And it'll have to go out and around. It's going to go near Annecy over here, which is wild because, for reference, taking a train from Geneva to Annecy takes about half an hour, 45 minutes maybe. And this is like the next closest place. So that's a huge distance to cover. Currently at CERN, we have little shuttles on the CERN campus to get you between some of the experiments so there's one main campus, which is the CERN campus, which is the one that we are looking at here, that I'm kind of circling. It's near the airport. Yeah, it's this little divot of the Swiss border that comes out. It's usually, I think it's like cuddled in here, and then it leads over to the French side. Anyways, CERN. And then, so there's little shuttles that go out to all the different experiments because each experiment has its own mini campus. But mainly it's the campus of just the experiment housing, or I guess like the main center. What's it called? The command center. So each experiment has a command center over top of it on the ring. But the thing is, if you have to do talks in the CERN campus, and then you have to go help run the experiment, it can be a long way to go. Essentially, it could be like a 20-minute bike ride, 30-minute bike ride. It could take a while via transit, taking a car. There isn't really a bus system except for the CERN bus system, and you're not walking that. So it's good that we have that transit set up, but that's for this. For this big thing, they're going to need to set up like larger hubs, I think. And this is going to have to be considered. It's all going to depend on where they place the experiments, what they can set up there. But that's going to be a big deal to think about. And this is going to have to go through the Celève, right? Mont Celève is over here. It's a big mountain near Geneva. Anyways, that's going to be interesting. Hosting different particle accelerators for the post-LHC era. Profiting from CERN's existing infrastructure. Woo! Here, France, Switzerland. Mostly in France. All right. Okay, so they're saying there's going to be 8 reference points. The FCC would be the most efficient and comprehensive scientific instrument for addressing the open question particle physics. Yeah, it will also be the biggest. The LHC is already like the world's largest physics experiment. I think it's maybe the world's largest scientific experiment. And the FCC will be even more so. It will be huge. Now, mind you, there are other proposed scientific experiments which are just essentially giant chunks of the ocean that we monitor for physics. This has to do with neutrino detectors. Essentially, the idea is that it'll be, you put a bunch of rods into the water, and then the neutrinos can go through the water, and the water works like a scintillator, so essentially they'll produce light, and that light can be detected by these big rod detectors that sit through the ocean. You get a big mapping. Lots of questions about that, including how do fish factor in? But even if you keep those in mind, this will be the largest, if not I mean, the LHC is already like the biggest experiment in the world, I'm pretty sure. And the FCC will be even bigger. So 200-meter depths. Yeah, okay, so this is going to be 200 meters under the ground. Successively hosting the same tunnel, a luminosity frontier electron positron collider, FCCEE, and the energy frontier proton collider. Okay, so it was a little bit confusing because the wording here made it sound like they were making one collider and then they were going to dig another one, but it's going to be one whole collider dug out, and then they're going to use that for the FCCEE and then the FCCHH. Okay. 4 experiments, up to 4 experiments, offering a shared and cost-effective technical and organizational infrastructure like the processors, LEP, and LHC. Okay, the LHC currently has 4. We haven't had any proposed. I don't know if they're going to talk about potential experiments here. I don't think so. I don't remember seeing any when I skimmed this before. But I'm a little bit surprised they're not going to add a few more experiments. It's going to be a huge, huge experiment. Just the huge collider. I don't see why you wouldn't use more of those points. Like, I think the LHC also has 8 surface points. Like, why wouldn't you do maybe like 6? Up the experiment number by 2. But the number of experiments is always kind of up in the air. I think when the LHC was being built, they originally planned for 2 experiments, which were CMS and Alice turned into Atlas, and then we later got another experiment called Alice, and then we have LHCb. So it'll be interesting. 7 decades of scientific research. Yep, it's gonna go for 70 years. That's a long time. On the bread side, it seems to be designed to last. So, okay, a scientific mission for the 21st century. The goal of the FCC is to push the energy and intensity frontier of particle colliders with an aim to reaching collision energies at 100 tera-electron volts in the search of new physics. Development of these colliders requires significant advances in many technologies. Over 150 universities, research institutions, industrial partners from all over the world are evaluating possibilities for new detector facilities, associated infrastructure, cost, establishment, global implementation scenarios, as well as appropriate international government sources. One of the main concerns of the SEC collaboration is that is making the future collider sustainable, implementing energy-efficient technology, and circular economy in all stages. That's important. There's an interesting thing with the LHC. They updated, I think in the most recent upgrade for the current run 3, they changed the cooling system on some of the experiments. I think Atlas changed their cooling system. Instead of using CO2 cooling, or did they switch to CO2 cooling? I don't know. But they've been working on this for a while, sort of making the experiment more sustainable. Biggest downside is going to be the fact that the experiment is going to need a lot of energy. The LHC already uses a lot of energy. This is going to use a lot more. So that's going to be kind of the real question. The effective interplay of different science and technology domains and the key success and the potential innovation with applications in society at large is considerable. Well, and that's it. I'm going to copy this and put this in the description. Yeah, there's more in the reports, more in the media kit. But this is just going to be a general basic synopsis. 24 minutes so far, according to one of my recording devices, although some of that will be cut in editing. Let's take a look at, where was it? This. So, no, wait, not this. Where was it? FCCEE, FCCH. I am interested in a few things from this, and I'll be keeping tabs. So there's currently they're not showing any proposed experiments. There might be some in more of the notes, but I want to see what experiments they have proposed, and if those experiments will vary between FCCEE and FCCHH. That's one thing I'm interested in. The second thing I'm interested in is the FCCEE. Right? They're saying they're going to run the FCCEE at, according to this, greater than 350 GeV, which is good. But also, so what's unfortunate is in collider physics, we have this thing called synchrotron radiation, known for synchrotrons, which are a type of circular collider. So the thing is, as you accelerate a particle, and it goes faster and faster and faster and faster and faster, as it starts to reach the speed of light, it starts to release energy as photons. And the closer and closer it gets, the more it sheds. And this happens sooner, the less massive that particle is. Electrons are really light. They are one of the lightest standard model particles that aren't massless or essentially massless. Neutrinos have mass, but they're essentially massless. So there's always been an issue with synchrotron radiation in electron positron colliders. It is difficult to do that. Now, this is why people are interested in muon, anti-muon colliders, which might be a fun topic to talk about. But, I mean, if there are major innovations in that, before they go ahead and make it, maybe they'll switch. But even so, I'm interested to see how they want to do an electron-positron collider at such high energy. I'm sure I'm just vaguely misremembering where the threshold was for when it essentially becomes worthless to be pumping energy into accelerating these particles because they're just shedding so much relative to their speed. These are things I need to review a little bit more before talking about it. Boy, howdy, my light is too bright. But yeah, so this is kind of an interesting summary. If you're interested in more of this sort of thing, I recommend please subscribing. And, read some of the other stuff, leave some comments, let me know what you want me to cover or talk about, and we'll do a bit more sort of experiment talks in the next video, whenever that will be. Currently, as a grad student, it is a busy time of year. There are exams, there are comprehensive exams, all that fun stuff. But until next time, I'll see ya. Bye.